Hi, everyone, and welcome to our usual Sunday talk within the Nine Sided Circle. I'm one of your two hosts, Nor Kyle.
And I'm the other one of your two hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
So, thank you to you all who are here live, and thank you to you all who are watching on the replay. We're really thrilled to have you, and we should probably give you a little bit of a YouTube spiel, like we always need to do. That is part of the gig. What do we need to speak about today, Mushtaq?
Um, if you're watching us on YouTube, welcome. We love having you watch us on YouTube. Watching us on YouTube is incredibly cool for us, and we would like it to be incredibly cool for you as well. To that end, there's a couple of things that you can do. One is like this video. It helps us greatly when you do. More people find us. Uh, Excitement is generated, fan clubs are formed, whatever. So like the video and think about hitting that subscribe button because that also helps us. I noticed that as we get more and more subscribers, our channel moves uh, up in the people who find us, people who are served our content on their home screens. But it doesn't really matter. We've got over 1,000 subscribers now. So the subscribers drive is functionally over. Um, Ideally, you will never see a an ad on this channel unless you watch the video all the way to the very, very end and then go a little bit further, and boom, there will be an ad. And most of them are
Yes.
not too bad, I have to say.
We've had some cool ones about
Yeah.
like charities for water and
Yeah, and
things
charities
like that.
for orphans of wars and pestilence and famine and destruction.
Yeah, we'll take that
Yeah.
over what we were getting before.
Yeah. So thank
And
you to everybody who
yeah,
made that possible. We are incredibly grateful to you, and we call down blessings from above upon your heads. So there.
I mean, what else? With that said, we do encourage you, if you are already subscribed or enjoy our content and feel called to subscribe now, one thing you can do as well is join our mailing list. We are trying to create, redundancy plans for keeping in touch with everyone so that we can stay connected in case anything were to happen to YouTube or to Facebook, where you can also join us on our page and in our Facebook forum that is linked to from our Facebook page. These are all places you can find us and join us and find links to join our live talks so that you can see these discussions in real time and be part of them in real time. Other than that,
Other
yay,
than
you're
that, there is
here.
one other thing,
Oh, what's the
which
other thing?
is comment. Please
Yes.
comment on these videos. We've had literally over 1,000 views on our last video, and it's a bunch of nice comments, but we would like more. So comment, and we will be happy to reply to all of the comments that make sense.
Yes, we do our best. You got to work with us. We appreciate that. Yeah. Great. So I think we can get to our topic for the evening.
Yes,
Yeah, so we are going to be touching on something kind of strange and quite
and spooky,
interesting. Yeah,
and spooky. That's
it's
that's
got
this
a
background is
spooky
my spooky
quality to it.
background.
I like your background. I like it a lot, actually. All right, we are going to be talking about this weird thing. I don't even know if I'm saying it right. What is it? Tzvarnoharno.
Tzvarnoharno, which is a word I think Gurdjieff made up for this.
I'm pretty sure that's a made up word, yeah. So I don't even know if I know how to spell that off the top of my head, but thankfully we have it in the title of this video, so yeah. Ah, where do we begin with that?
Um, we begin by turning my phone off. Jeez. Uh,
We can all take a moment to do that. I'm gonna mute my
yeah.
phone. There we go. Okay.
There. Sorry about the dings and rings. Everybody wants my attention.
Too popular.
So, um, where to start with this? Okay, there are only a couple of references to it.
In the
And the first,
Gurdjieffian
yeah, in the
writings and stuff.
Gurdjieffian writings and such. This is not a word that is found in the Sufi tradition, though we have a word that is functionally equivalent, which we will discuss in a little bit. Um, the first mention of it was in uh, a book that Gurdjieff published called The Herald of Coming Good, which described his work in building a school. And he was explaining why he got into a horrible car wreck and spent a week in a coma. And he said it wasn't bad luck, and it wasn't because he was a crappy driver, which by all accounts he was, but it was this force, first mentioned by King Solomon, according to him. That's where the word is supposed to come from, though I don't know of any root to it, and it doesn't really matter. What matters is that there is this idea of a force that lives in the collective unconscious of humanity that works as a counter agent to people waking up. This is not like a conscious force, it's not like an intelligent force. It is more like a natural Newtonian, every action has an equal and opposite reaction sort of thing. So when a person starts working on being awake, this force becomes somewhat active in helping to keep you asleep. And this may uh, take the form of singing you lullabies or take the form of completely trashing your life. The worst part is that it's you that's doing it. It's not anything outside of you on this level. Um, and it's something that I've observed over and over again in my life when um, the work gets to a certain threshold, events conspire to make it more difficult. You have to overcome some shit. And this takes many different forms. And this is found both in on the individual level and on the global level. Um, you've heard me say before that no teaching survives much past one generation intact. You know, we look at the teachings of the Buddha versus people burning incense and making prayers to the statue of the Buddha today. There was a disconnect in there somewhere because that's not what the Buddha taught. Worshipping the Buddha is not the teachings of the Buddha. We see it in Christianity where you have the, the teachings of Jesus, and then right after you have Paul, who did not know Jesus, never met him, was an enemy of the church, who had either some sort of psychotic break or a revelation on how he could destroy Christianity, um, or how he could destroy the early church by creating his version of Christianity, which was much easier and more simple than what was being taught before. Um, that will probably upset a few people. Sorry, not sorry. Um, and this is not just my idea. There are a number of areas of the teachings of Jesus that look upon Paul askance. And today, well, actually tomorrow, we have one of the more recent examples of this on a global scale. Tomorrow is a commemorative day called Ashura, which in the Muslim world represents the Battle of Karbala, where the forces of the then, um, well, Yazid was not the caliph at that point. He was still the son of the caliph. But the forces of this group that had gained power within the political structure of Islam uh, basically murdered the grandson of the Prophet. Now, the Sunnis have their side of this story, the Shia have their side of this story. I don't care about any of that. I don't care about the politics of it. What I note is that starting with the death of the Prophet to his grandson being killed at this battle, in that short amount of time, it was assured that Islam would never be united as a religion ever again. And this has been the case up until today. Today, you have Sunnis and Shia killing each other, blowing up mosques, right? Um, and this is all stemming from that one event. So that makes sure that what started out as a way for humanity to awaken, to make sure that it was a constant strife in the community. And as long as that strife exists, the Islam will never be united. It will never be one thing. And it has fragmented into all sorts of different things. And I suggest to you that this is a classic example of what happens with this unconscious force that develops animosity to those who begin to awaken. Does that make sense so far?
Mhm.
I mean, I realize most people who are not Muslim have like zero background in this event. And if you do hear about it, you usually hear about it in Western news and it's presented as something kind of strange. So, what does this mean for us today? Look around at the world and ask yourself, where are there strange and unusual forces that seem to work towards the mechanicalization of humanity? To start. I mean, with Ashura and Karbala in that battle, it makes no sense. It makes no sense that a large faction of the Muslim world would want the death of the Prophet's grandson, especially when he was not trying to take over the caliphate. He, basically suggested that it was his right, but he wasn't pushing it because he'd seen what happened to his father and his older brother. But they still ended up killing him and a whole bunch of his family. If you look at this with the teachings of Jesus, when we look at the actual teachings of Jesus, which are best typified by Matthew chapters 5 through 8, thereabouts, when you read those are, and for those of you who don't know your New Testament, that's the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount and the Lord's Prayer, that whole section. That is as close to what Jesus actually taught that we can say this is likely true, that he said these things or something very much like them. and how different that is from what Paul taught. And so what you get is Jesus saying, when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites who go forth with people, going before them and hollering out, "Hey, look at this great guy. He's praying." Um, and he goes on to say, "This person has gotten their reward. When you pray, pray in secret, and your Father who is in heaven will hear you in secret." Now contrast that with the followers of Paul who today stand in the middle of football fields and show off how pious they are. Which side of the teachings of Jesus does that fall on? That is an example of this force at work, making sure that the teachings of Jesus never get a foothold. My personal opinion. I'm sure there are people who are piling up firewood around a stake at this very moment for me even suggesting this, but such is life. Siddhartha Gautama said, "Wake up." That was basically his whole teaching. He said, life is suffering. The way to get out of suffering is to wake up. So wake up. Lose your attachments. Stay awake. And instead, people become attached to the idea of the Buddha as something to worship and ask favors from. I could go on. This happens over and over again in the history of humanity. And every time it does, we lose something. So, in the case of Karbala, we lost the possibility of a people being united under one message. That's gone, and that will never come back in my estimation. And now everybody sits around and argues, Shias against Sunnis, Sunnis against Sunnis, Shias against Shias. We like this school of jurisprudence. We like that one. They're all correct. Pick one. Things like that. And then you have people like the Wahhabis who say we have to just go back to the purity of the Quran and the Sunnah, and then they tell you what it all means rather than allowing you to figure it out for yourself. So on a world schedule, that's what we got. Now, this same thing happens inside of us. When you begin to wake up, there is a part of you that will work assiduously to put you back to sleep. And it will trash your life sometimes to accomplish this if you allow it. There's not much we can do about things on the world level. We have that going on right now. I mean, what is Russia invading Ukraine other than something to throw the world into chaos and keep us at a level of utter panic? What is China buzzing Taiwan but the same thing? And until we can learn to combat this in ourselves, we don't hold a lot of possibility for combating it at the level of the whole world. I mean, if God put me in charge of the universe, I would come up with ideas on how to stop all of the stupidity, but they would probably fail miserably. So it's probably lucky that God did not put me in charge of the universe. He knows better. So that's the main thrust of this evening's discussion. What do you think? Is this completely full of shit? Are we just totally deluded?
Jonathan.
Yeah, I had a question.
Yes.
Usually, if there's opposition, something or somebody is feeling threatened, that there's something that is to be lost or threatened. So my question is, if there's opposition in me individually to awakening, what is it in me that is potentially feeling threatened by this awakening?
The machine, your conditioned self, your ego, your mechanical desire to stay asleep. All of us are like grumpy teenagers who don't want to get up and go to school. We're laying in bed going, Mom, leave me alone. So that's basically what it is as far as I can tell. We have a very, very strong impulse to stay asleep. And the impulse is unconscious and it is mechanical. That's the strangest, in some ways, worst thing about this is that this is not intelligent. This is not the devil working against humanity. This is no conscious entity going, oh, I'm going to screw up the humans. This is a force that we create in ourselves, and it operates from us, and it operates individually and collectively. And it operates at the level of the unconscious, not at the level of the conscious mind. So, I mean, think about it. Here are all of these guys, and they're like setting up this battle at Karbala. They outnumber Hussein and his followers probably 10 to 1, if not more. And most of them were probably decent people, and they find themselves in this position, and probably a lot of them would say, I don't even know how I got there. They were probably not bad people who had been tricked into a bad situation and did not have the will to say no to it.
Do you think they might say, I thought I was doing the right thing until I realized it was too late?
Yeah, they might. I mean, I like to believe that with a few exceptions, most of those people were not bad people. They just got caught up in a bad situation, and because they didn't have any real individuality, they just followed along. And we've seen that over and over again. Everybody's quiet today.
Well, I feel like it's kind of a large thing to grasp. Jonathan.
Well, I'll take advantage of the quietness.
Well, Levita will follow after you. Yeah.
Okay. One thing I've noticed when in moments of awakeness, I notice things about myself that I didn't notice before, see things about myself that I didn't see before. It's like shining a light on in a dark part of myself that I can now see a part of myself. Sometimes often I see things I don't like about myself. Those things that I don't like about myself don't want to be seen. And I think they're examples of the resistance to awakening. It's like, stop seeing me, stop doing what you just did that caused me to be seen, that to be seen. I've got to give an example, and this is like if someone offends me, many people, if they get offended, they react back with anger. It's not my way. I'll usually just take it, but later on, but I still feel that I've been offended, and I want to get them back for offending me. So, but I don't do it directly. I do it indirectly. I'll like hide in the sidelines, then snipe at them with some snide comment, and I feel good. Then I feel I got them back. I feel good about myself again. Now, I've been told about this characteristic of myself, and I didn't like to hear it. But since I was alerted to it, I've been noticing it, and it's true. That's my game that I play, and when I notice it, that's me shining a light on aspects of myself I don't like. So that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and that aspect of yourself is a method by which you keep yourself asleep. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Can you wrap your mind around that idea?
yeah,
That
that's exactly it.
when you do that passive aggressive behavior, which is what the clinicians call it, um, it means that you are deep asleep. Probably 100% of the time, you do that behavior only in sleep. That in itself can be a little bit of a blessing because um, if you know that to be the case, then when you find yourself starting to do some passive aggressive behavior, you can go, wait a minute, I'm acting from the sleep of the machine to do this. And you can wake yourself up. And then you can choose to let the whole shit go if you want. And that ain't a bad thing.
Helpful thing. Thank you for sharing that, Jonathan. I know, like, it's it
It's
can
hard.
be weird and hard, yes, to talk about the stuff that we might cringe at when we recognize in ourselves. So, thanks for sharing an example so that we could understand exactly where you were coming from. Much appreciated. Rita, what's up?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if our base desires are to move away from pain and toward pleasure, that explains some things, but so some of it I can see being triggered by discomfort and trying to move away from it. And thank you for the words. So the sleep of the machine, does this have an actual protective function for us that most of us don't know anything about?
At least theoretically. The job of what I call the machine is to keep you safe. The machine drives your car. The machine notices when things are out of place. The machine does all of this stuff, and its sole purpose is to keep you alive. But our awareness, our being, has given up all the control to this function. And this is the idea of being identified with the sleep of the machine. Here's the fun fact. Here's the weird thing. You, the real you, is never asleep. Essence does not sleep. Essence is constantly awake. When essence identifies with the sleep of the machine, then it's as if essence were asleep. If the machine wakes up, and this is the weird thing, the machine is what wakes up. Essence doesn't wake up. Essence disidentifies. But if the machine wakes up, then you can identify with the awakeness of the machine. It's weird because when the part of you, the mechanical, conditioned part of you that I call the machine, is awake, it's quiet. The talking inside your head ceases. The fantasizing about past and future stops unless it is necessary. And things become quiet. The machine is only noisy because it's asleep and it's dreaming and it's having nightmares. And one of those nightmares says, everything will fall apart if awakening happens, which is actually true, but not in the sense that it thinks.
So would it be fair to say, let's see if I understood you, the machine keeps us alive, but our inner essence, our awakened inner essence, allows us to actually live?
Yes, that's a really good way of saying it.
Too.
What do you think, Noor?
I think that's a really good way to conceptualize this,
Okay, now don't go back and rewrite it so nobody understands it.
Nope, we don't do that shit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One
Okay.
question.
Yes.
What 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 to do to protect oneself from that seems to be an evil force that even the grandson of the prophet seems not immune to it.
That's a very good question because sometimes there is not much that you can do other than get out of the way. And he was trying to get out of the way at the time that he ended up at Karbala. He was heading to Kufa, as I remember, where he had been given sanctuary. But the people who were in power feared the fact that he even existed. And my sense is that they would have wiped out the prophet's bloodline completely had they been able to.
Likely so.
Yeah. Because that was a constant threat to anyone's power. And the prophet's bloodline would have ended up being a pawn to that as well. They were basically screwed no matter what. I hate to say that. And, now not only have I offended the Christians, but I've offended all the Muslims because there was no good outcome. There was no way at that point. From the point where there was a fight over the caliphate after the death of the prophet, to the point where Karbala happened, it was a direct line to complete chaos within the religion. And like I said, because of what happened at Karbala, Muslims will never be united. They have basically been, and I don't mean united politically. Who cares about politics? I mean united spiritually. They now get to fight over who was right and who was wrong rather than listening to the truth of the religion.
Which means everybody's distracted by this political stuff. And you're right. Yeah.
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 And when we look at it in ourselves, I mean, as you all know, I am fascinated by cult phenomena. And one of the most fascinating things is the number of cult leaders who start out trying to do good, believing that they can do good, working towards doing good, and end up destroying the lives of hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. I mean, for those of you who are old enough to remember, in the beginning, Jim Jones was a reformer. And then he was a mass murderer. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is the only difference between what happened to Karbala and what happened to Martin Luther King is one of scale.
Is it alright if we
Because, yeah,
check in with a couple people
yep.
who I saw unmuted? Alright, we'll get back to that. I'm bookmarking it in my brain. Levita, I see you have your hand up. I see you. Ailey, you were unmuted at one point. Did you have something you wanted to share?
I want to ask, what's the difference between this force and Kunda buffer?
That is a good and fascinating question. And
Gurdjieff word.
yeah, Gurdjieff word. Kunda buffer is, according to the book Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, an organ that was installed in the human beings of Earth at one point to try and correct some weirdness that was going on. It had negative consequences and was removed, but the effects of it persisted. And so you could say that this force, this phenomena, could be created by the effects of the organ Kunda buffer in Gurdjieffian language. And it would be something that it is a reverberation. Does that make any kind of sense at all?
Yes, thank you. And how I conceptualize it is that we are not teach our or the human being don't have the right tools to become an adult. Is that right?
I believe so. We have access to the tools, but we also do not have the will to use them, if that makes sense. I mean, for instance, in the couple hundred videos that we've done in the last 3 years, we go over what those tools are over and over and over again. And it's not that you can't find the tools, it's you have to find the will to use them. It's like dieting, where people say, "Oh, just don't eat as much and you'll be fine." And that's utterly not true. And we know that it's not true because we've seen the effect of that. We've seen how that philosophy hurts people. And this is kind of the same thing. We have the tools, but we don't use them. Instead, we say stupid stuff like, "Oh, just eat less. Just be an asshole less." So yeah, it's an interesting problem. But for those who are familiar with the Kunda buffer story, it does make a good metaphor for how this all started.
So it is more precisely, we must learn how to use our attention and the combination of will, how to focus.
Yep.
And on the other hand, I saw last lecture of you about the Enneagram of Rasa. So how to deal with all those emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But
which reminds me, we are going to be doing a class on that sometime in the very near future.
it's very interesting, the how to work, how the Rasa is working. But it isn't easy. It is not easy to
No.
even for a person who is an adult. I for myself, I'm an adult, but it is not easy to deal with the Rasa.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's that old English saying, "If it was easy, everybody'd be doing it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how can we quickly define rasa for people who have not learned about that
Rasa
yet?
is a Sanskrit word, and it means like an essence or a flavor. And in this case, it's talking about a series of essential emotional states that a person has.
If we have done a video on that in the past, I
Yeah,
will
I'll
have
link it.
us
I'll link it at the end of
Yeah.
this.
Thank you, Ailey. Those are good questions. Levita.
Gosh, it seems like it's the early 2000s, but that was 20 years ago. I got a book that's about this thick, and it's called, I forget the exact title, but it was a list of the Christian denominations. It was this thick and really tiny print. And I figured when I opened it up, I figured it was going to be like denomination and then a lot of talk about it, denomination, but it wasn't. It was like, there's like as many Christian denominations as there are Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked into other religions, I found that we think of Christian and Muslim and Jewish, and all of them are splintered in some way. Like when you talked about the Muslims. And I wish I could remember who said it. Nancy might know. But somebody said that religion, you've created God in your own image when your God hates the same people you do.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't remember where that's from either, but that is a
it's one of those higher
quote.
truths.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like spirituality isn't the problem. The Muslim, I'm trying to think of the word. The Muslim tenets aren't the problem. The Christian tenets aren't the problem. The words of Muhammad, of Jesus, I don't know who started the Jewish religion, but you get my point. Those aren't the problems. It's when somebody else comes in and starts interpreting, I guess to feed their machine,
Yeah.
so to speak,
Yeah.
then it just goes sideways, and you have all of these terrible, terrible things. That's what it seems like to me.
And you ain't wrong.
Yeah.
You have just described a very serious problem, and we see it all the time. And it's often boiled down into Nancy has made the
Yeah.
observation.
Nancy says any statement of just do whatever is ignoring the difficulties involved.
Yeah.
So that was in reference
And
to.
there's a lot of ways to say, just do it, right? It's like, I know this from people who
Swoosh.
have their opinions on, say, losing weight and getting healthy. There's one person, a mutual friend of Nancy's and mine, who is always saying, physics supersedes biology. If you put in less calories, you lose weight. Now, this is demonstrably not true. And if you get him to quote the physics, he tries to quote the second law of thermodynamics, but not the full one, because uh, thermodynamics says that energy will move towards a steady state in a closed system, and the human body is in no way a closed system, not even close to a closed system. We're an entire open system. And our metabolism is regulated through a number of different processes where you can literally cut your calories by a quarter and gain weight because your metabolism slows down to conserve your energy. It's an interesting thing. But eat less is a simple, easy answer that you can say to people. Of course, the person involved has not noticed that that doesn't even work for them. But that's neither here nor there, because we are not picking on people who cannot defend themselves, even if their position is indefensible.
Yeah, I think you're right, because when you said it's not a closed system, I just went, yeah, because I can think of at least two things that affect our metabolism that isn't food.
Yeah.
And then you think about, and this happens when you get older, oh, well, I've been eating a lot of ice cream. I've been to those all you can eat buffets and ate all I could. So maybe it's time to kind of shed that weight. And then you do what you used to do to shed weight, and it doesn't work. You start
Yeah.
gaining weight, and you're sitting there like, and you're not thinking about the human body is a complex piece of machinery. And we
Yeah.
only know like this much about what's going on.
And every
Yeah.
body has its own
Yeah.
mechanical
And
quirks.
it is an open system.
Yeah.
It gets
Yeah.
its energy
Yeah.
from outside. It regulates how it gets its energy. And it upregulates and downregulates as it is needed. But this force that we are talking about will use things like this to help keep people asleep.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
So,
It's
So I bring it back around.
yeah, we
Yeah.
just have a couple
I mean-
things I want to touch on too.
yeah.
Sorry.
That's also true about like even your mental health, like
Yeah.
stuff that you used to do when you were younger to like, well, you had a bad breakup or you got your feelings hurt, that you could do to feel better. One day it's not working and you don't know why,
Yep.
Nancy, I know you mentioned that the quote that Lolita quoted is from Anne Lamott. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
I looked it up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Much
you.
Appreciated.
My inner filing system is just a jumble. It's really crowded.
All
I
good.
think of Google as my external memory.
I mean,
That's a good way to
take
think of it.
advantage for now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, to add to this,
Yes.
as we've said, this word Tzvarnoharno doesn't seem to exist anywhere. But there is an Arabic word that we use that is pretty close in the way that we use it in our context, and that is Dajjal.
And I will type that out. I also wanted to bring out my bookmark in my head, you mentioned Martin Luther King Jr. Did
Oh
you
yes,
want to
that is
touch
a
on that?
perfect example of this. Here you have somebody who is working towards greater peace and consciousness in the world. And I don't give a damn what you think of him. And I don't give a damn what he might or might not have done in his private life. I look at the things that he accomplished. And he accomplished a lot. So much so that people were literally waking up who were involved in the process of what he was doing. And so, of course, some asshole has to shoot him. This happens over and over again. Malcolm X is another example of that. He is involved in a cult. The cult claims to be a Muslim. So he goes to Mecca and they let him come in. And he has a complete life changing epiphany while in Mecca, a total transformation as a human being. He comes back and his own folks shoot him. Yeah, so Dajjal means the deceiver. It's not a word that's found in the Quran, but it is found in Hadith, and it's usually discussed as if it were an antichrist kind of figure. People often relate it. Our take, though, is that it is not some being in the outside. It is exactly this unconscious mechanical uh, urge to put us and each other to sleep. So you look at something, I guess this is my night for being politically incorrect. Take, for example, Black Lives Matter. Here you have a bunch of people who say, hey, we would really like to not be killed in our beds for no good reason. We would like to not be afraid of the police who are supposed to be protecting us. We would like to not be killed by you guys. Right? Simple message. Totally reasonable. Any reasoning being would look at the situation and go, yeah, that makes total sense. You guys should not be getting killed like this. Let's put a stop to it. And instead, this deceiver comes in and lies to a whole shitload of people about what this actually means. And the entire thing gets twisted and distorted into something that looks totally different. And um, it works to destroy the original idea. And it all started with asking people to wake up to the fact that one segment of our population is getting killed by the police more than any other segment, except for Native Americans, who are pretty much neck and neck with black people getting shot by the cops. But they don't talk about that. So, from please stop killing us to all of this crap that we have seen, trying to rewrite the meaning of that simple statement. That's what the Dajjal looks like. Does that make sense? I mean, I realize I'm sliding off into areas that we usually don't touch on, but a lot of this stuff in the greater world becomes kind of politically tinged because politics is one of the tools that is used by this unconscious mechanical force to help keep the masses asleep.
It's one of the nexuses for how this manifests in the real world.
Yeah. And yet, I have to come back to the idea that where you can work on it is inside yourself.
Jefferson is unmuted. I'd love to check in with you, Jefferson.
Yeah, lay it on us, Jefferson.
Oh yeah, it's great discussion. I'm interested in the machine, and I'm interested in, or I just have a comment and see if it turns into a question. The Kunda buffer is that these concepts, I mean, while you're saying the place that you can work on them is within, there's something in the characterization. It's almost as if they are, or no, something you said earlier, and I might have misheard it, but it was something like, it's not intelligence. And
Yes.
so as I observe my own resistances that come up, like when I do different practices, self-witnessing, exercising, different things that to better myself and work on awakeness, and the resistances that come, I would say that it is intelligence, because if it wasn't for intelligence, there would be no ability to recognize the contrast of what to work on next within myself.
Yeah, and I would say we're talking about two different things.
Okay, how so?
The intelligence to recognize what to work on next is not part of that mechanical impulse towards slumber.
How so in my experience, there is only unity, right? Like everything is connected ultimately. So it is intelligence with a capital I that allows me to come back around to work on that which is putting me to sleep. I mean, are you saying, is the machine the unconscious in a psychological definition?
Not exactly. I mean, you can draw certain parallels to the unconscious. So, take, for example, what's going on right now in Gaza. The Palestinians and the Israelis are shooting at each other again. This is utterly predictable and completely mechanical, and there is no intelligence involved in it, no matter what people claim. And everybody's claiming, oh, the other side is wrong and they're done this. And it's just what they do. And it happens almost like clockwork. And you could have asked me 2 weeks ago, hey, are the Palestinians and the Israelis going to start shooting at each other again? And I would have said, yeah, they are. Don't know exactly when, but it's going to happen that way. So where's the intelligence in that? Step down from the universal idea of it is all one and it is all intelligent, because whether it's illusion or not, it's a very persistent illusion that this force works in this way to keep people in this state of somnambulism.
For me, it's like when we talk about world events and then give them these kinds of descriptions, we're talking about something that the individual cannot do anything about. All of those individuals would have to do something about it. So for me, from that perspective, intelligence is involved. It's involved. It's not. I'm not going to say it is intelligence, but it's involved, is what I'm saying. From my perspective.
And I would look at it and say, yeah, no intelligence involved here at all. But we may be defining intelligence differently. And that's entirely possible. But to me, I look at that and go, this is completely mechanical. This is stimulus response at its most fundamental. The bell rings, the dog salivates.
Yeah, see, now that puts it into a psychological frame. So, I mean, we'll just, I'll agree to disagree, or I'll agree with you in terms of like a compartmentalization, or if we're talking about fragmentation. But to me, intelligence with a capital I is driving everything. It's what drives awakeness. There's more people that probably will never even be interested in being awake then I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah. And we don't even need to disagree on this, because I do not disagree with you that there is this something that we can call intelligence or being that drives everything. And at the same time, I can recognize that uh, most of my fellow humans are in a state of somnambulism and they lack any ability to act intentionally. Might even happen to me every now and again. Of course, not you. I'm not suggesting you would do that.
never. Silly.
But I think in order to actually figure this out, we would have to understand what each of the other of us means when we say intelligence.
True.
And I'm not saying that my definition is correct and yours is not, because they're probably both correct or probably both equally wrong, but in
Fair.
interestingly different ways.
Fair.
So continue to disagree and find ways to explain your disagreement, because it will make for better conversations in the future.
Well, here's where I would go with it. Just if I take it one step further, I read something. I don't know Latin, but it's a statement that goes, to deceive oneself is human, but to remain in error out of stubbornness is diabolical. And it's just kind of a statement that I'm contemplating, because that has to do with like the inner workings of like in the recognition of the thing that's trying to put me back to sleep, and the choice to, it's like, if it comes up, if it's like, oh yeah, that's not good for my system to put that sugar into my teeth or into my body, and then I go and then I'm going to go and do it again, and then I'm going to go and do it again. That's a place where I'm in contemplation of. I don't know if there's anything even to speak to about it, but that's part of my journey at the moment.
Yeah, and that is an interesting area of meditation. But there are also the people who will say, I'm not deceiving myself. That whole thing about sugar is a lie that the government and the space aliens have tried to foist on us. Sugar is good for you. I like my sugar. I ain't going to take my sugar away from me from nobody. There is not even the awareness of error. And that is what is really diabolical. Even when you run up against something that you don't believe, there should be the ability to fact check it. And that, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is part of this Dajjal process, this deceiver process.
So when you say this ability to fact check it, like this inward sense of, I should check on that, or
Yeah, or,
yeah.
oh, this is new data. Maybe I should see if it's true, rather than just discounting it because it does not fit with my worldview.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a huge lack of that in my perception in the world right now. That's a really important. And again, going back to having been having a really I have degrees in self-deception. It checks out good against my my path forward, path into new ways of living.
I like that. I may steal that from you. Degrees in self-deception. I have had that same feeling.
That's thanks, Jefferson. I mean, it's good to have these discussions, even if we don't necessarily land in the same spot. I think there's a periphery that we're exploring,
Yeah.
and I think this term intelligence can be a muddy concept if we don't take time to.
Yeah, and I just
delve
consider
deeper.
it, we're looking at the elephant from the perspective of the trunk and the tail.
Yeah, same ultimately.
You know that metaphor, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's heard that story. Yeah. I'm always waiting for the one person who's never heard that story so I can tell it to them and watch their face when they get it.
So I want to check in with Zainab.
Yes.
I have two questions here.
Yeah.
The point where you want the personality to become passive, is it at this point where you start seeing this force?
Oftentimes, yes. When you start getting the machine to be more awake and thereby to be more quiet, when the machine is awake, it's watching. It is paying attention to its environment and things that are going on around it. And so you will start noticing things, um, oftentimes a lot more deeply. My one Bagua student, I've been teaching her awareness exercises. And now she's like, I never noticed how many birds there are around here and all of these other things that she just had been oblivious to. And that's because she's more awake. And so her machine is on duty. It's checking the environment. It's cataloging the birds. It's cataloging the vehicles. It is noticing the textures of the ground. All of these things that it was oblivious to before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the machine becomes awake, but then not being identified with the action. That's how it's passive.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
It's not throwing fits. It's not having tantrums. It's not having bad dreams.
Yeah. Okay.
So you
And
had two
one,
questions. Yes.
yeah. And the other one, could the Karbala event help Muslims to wake up? I mean,
It could have. I think it's too late, at least in a general sense. I mean, it's been 1,400 years and we're still fighting over that shit. So I doubt that it could cause a general awakening, but it can certainly cause awakening in individuals who contemplate it. But the trick to that is you have to ask, what does Karbala mean? And then not listen to anybody else's answer, because there are lots of people out there who want to tell you what it means.
yeah.
And you have to find out what it means for you, not for some stuffy Ayatollah somewhere who's convinced that they're infallible. Did I say that out loud? Shit.
Your trouble today.
I am.
As Levita said earlier, equal opportunity offender today. But this is important to talk about, and I think that's a really excellent point, is that, yeah, it is too late to undo what has followed is what, 1,400 years, as you said, of further damage and entrenchment in certain ways of interpreting and experiencing this event and
Yeah.
responding to it or reacting to it in ways which were destructive, further destruction, on top of the damage that had already been done. However, as Zainab was, you know, mentioning, yes, it can be an opportunity for awakening, similar actually to what Jefferson was talking about. where we look at an event and say, what is happening here? What is the significance of this to me? How can I do, like a heart check and a gut check and a mind check in response to this, rather than reacting to it with further destructiveness?
If your machine is awake, then and you train it, then your intuition and your gut feeling is getting sharper.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
so you don't have to ask yourself if you train yourself to, and it costs a lot of effort to keep your machine awake, then your essence teach yourself. Your essence become your master. So what Jefferson dealing with, Jefferson, if you starts to awake, you awaken your machine. You just follow your intuition and your gut's feelings, and you are very intelligent to do that. So that's how I listen the story. So the jaw, the jaw, we can overcome by that, isn't it?
Yeah. And I see
Yeah,
Jefferson actually
Jefferson.
typed out a
Yeah,
question
yeah.
that you just addressed. So let's dig into that a little bit more. Would you like to read the question, Lady Noor?
Or Jefferson can, if he feels up
Oh,
for it.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. What did I write? Who wrote that question? Uh, yeah, just to continue from Zainab's question, is it an oversimplification to orient towards train the machine or direct the lower self towards awakeness, right? I mean, that's, there's a lot of, I've got a lot of training in like neurolinguistic programming in my past, and there, these different, and then Huna, all this stuff from the Huna world, and there's a lot of paths that I've traversed, and I see, and there's a lot of ways to orient that I could speak a language, but I'm trying to get to something essential here, because what I'm doing, what I find myself doing is, it's just coming down to these moments. It all comes down to moments of choice. Do I sit and practice this breath now, or do I make another cappuccino? Do I condition my body because my body is hungry for more exercise, or do I, go read and feed my conceptual mind? Ellie just spoke of that training of the machine, or it's like, I've even heard the metaphor, big metaphor in NLP trainings was like, train the horse. The horse, if you do not train it, it'll just go eat grass and get super fat.
Yeah. And that is actually a metaphor they stole from Gurdjieff.
Yeah, I think that my training company stole a lot of Sufi. There was Nasruddin tales, and that they changed the names and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. So training the machine is, in my estimation, incredibly important. And so NLP is a great way to train certain aspects of the machine. And it's shit for others. To train certain aspects of the machine, you actually need physical practice. And it can be any number of different kinds of physical practice. But it's physical practice that breaks down the mechanicality of human movement. One example that I'm constantly using to ad nauseum effect is that of fencing, because that's one of my methods. And it's one of my methods because it forces me to be conscious in my body, to train the machine to move in certain ways, but to allow itself to be directed by my intention. I cannot think fast enough to parry a thrust towards my heart. No amount of NLP will, and I was doing NLP with Bandler and Grinder in the 70s, so I have a little background in this. NLP cannot work effectively at the level that you need to work at in order to parry a really fast thrust.
Yeah, just to speak, I actually don't use NLP. I have lots of training. I actually do not. I've renounced 98% of the methodology because I'm looking for essence, the essentials. So
yeah, and I myself occasionally use things out of my NLP bag. I have tools that I think work a whole lot better. But every now and again, I pull something out because it's the tool called for in the moment. It's like that one wrench that you carry in your tool bag and you only use it every 3 years. But when you need it, you need it.
there's a book on tape called Your Body is Your Unconscious Mind or Your Subconscious Mind.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
And I think that speaks well to what you're saying about the physical. I mean, a lot of the trauma world and all of the therapies are using that angle. It's not, using that approach right now is just to let the body. But it's interesting because it's like the difference between, you just said the conceptual mind cannot parry, if I'm using that word right, the thrust to your heart. But it's like, so awakeness really isn't that conceptual mind, is it? It's
it's not.
Like some grand unification or something. I don't know, what is that?
When it's all together, in my experience, and this is just speaking from me and how I describe it, it is as if all of these pieces were put together into one whole, and there is that which is over all of that, giving it all intention. So, my intention is to win the fencing match. My attention tells me when an attack is coming towards me, and it tells me when an opening is presented. My presence sits over both of those to keep me awake. So those three things that we talk about all the time: attention, intention, presence. And when all three of those are united, then you have a whole on. Does that make sense?
I would add one thing more is
Yes.
breath. The breath is very important.
Oh yeah, breath is absolutely important. You can't fence if you can't breathe. You can't climb a mountain if you can't breathe. You can't ride a bicycle if you can't breathe. Everything starts with breath. So I'm glad you remind us of this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's I comment to you because about what Jefferson is saying about the conceptual mind. It is very important to leave the conceptual mind a little bit in the background. To become awake is the marriage of the conceptual mind and your moving center. Then you come in the feeling, and you if you meditate, you will come there, and then you have to how do you call it, to cultivate it. And if you do a good meditation, you follow the breath. And your conceptual mind will sleep, will stop. That's my experience.
Yeah.
And then it is very important because when you do that, then is to you what you're doing, fencing or and the intention, it it gets more quality.
Mm-hmm. So that it just gave me a little epiphany there.
Yeah.
For the last week or so, I've been working with an artificial intelligence program, and it's one that is used to create graphics. The image behind me is created in this program. And the way it works is I come up with an intention, the intention of the image that I want. Then my conceptual mind creates a description of the image. I give the prescription to the machine, because it's literally a machine, and it gives me back its interpretation of my description. I look at what it gives me, and then I refine it from that, and I keep changing things until I get exactly what I want. One of the things it taught me is that I will never get exactly what I want just using the machine.
Intent.
Yeah. But I just realized I find this so fascinating because it's so much like what we do, which is ideally to trust the machine to interpret our concepts in a way that is useful to us.
And something that I observe is this machine is if I talk with my daughter, for example, with the kids, it seems easier to talk to them about this awakening or oneness or these concept things, because I think their machine is not that have filters or more.
Yeah, it's not as
habits.
entrenched.
Yes, because if I talk with the grown-ups, seems they don't, it's difficult for them to understand, because they already have this concept of what they have in their minds. So it's difficult for new things or new learnings to come in. Yeah, that's my experience.
And that is not, I mean, that's normal and not surprising. And I think it's lovely that you're able to have conversations like that with your daughter. For example. Thanks, Mr. Keene.
So is this force same as the goddess Maya that you talked before, or is different?
No, because the goddess Maya is not malevolent. And this force sure seems like it's malevolent. This force is designed to create fitna. Fitna is an Arabic word, and
Yes.
it means like
Discord, conflict.
conflict and
fracture.
discord.
Yeah.
And creating division within the
word.
group.
Yep.
Yeah, and Maya doesn't care about fitna. Maya is perfectly happy for you to be in good dreams. You don't have to be in bad dreams. You don't have to struggle against other members of your community or people outside your community. Here's a hint, there's nobody outside your community. You just don't realize it.
Yeah, from the another angles that I see is from like this. There's this 99 names of God. One of them I think it's the deceivers, you know. So it's just all is our force in play. It's the deceiver, there's the awakening, oneness, everything is, we are in this constant action of this force of the names.
Yeah. Boy, we could talk for a whole hour just on that.
Next time then.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually going to be a good topic.
What was it? So I can write it down if we were to put it in a couple words.
One of the 99 names of God, I can't remember which one and exactly what the translation is, but it kind of works out as deceiving.
Okay.
We'll look it up. We'll find it.
Yeah.
If it's
don't worry
there,
about it.
we'll find it.
You
If it's
got
not
it.
there, we'll make it up.
So what can we do to, in day-to-day life, challenge this?
This is not an easy question. Okay, having been caught by this force more than once in my life, I have come to the conclusion that you have to be on constant guard from it, but not in a paranoid sense, just in the sense of if you let yourself fall asleep, you will stick uh, a rod through the bicycle spokes of your life in order to keep you asleep. And it can come from the inside or apparently from the outside. So there are a myriad of ways for you to screw up in your own life, just letting yourself follow certain mechanical habits. Like if you are not good at managing money, let that fall for a week or two, and all of a sudden you have $10,000 in credit card debt. So you have to be on constant guard for that. And at the same time, Gurdjieff points out that the more benevolent you are, you will get a force of malevolence directed towards you, which I think sometimes is true. So you have to, this is where the way of the sly man comes in. You have to learn to be benevolent in such a way that you don't trip that mechanical switch off that says, all right, you know, it's as if there were white blood cells that are designed particularly to attack uh, benevolent awakeness. And you have to learn to do what COVID does, which is to slip by them when they ain't looking.
Yikes. But yeah.
Yeah, weird metaphor, but it's what I could come up with in the moment.
Well, I mean, I kind of think of this as like sometimes people like to make goodness, quote unquote, I don't think that's the best word, but we'll use it, goodness into a punching bag. Like they look at it and this perhaps they feel like a disgust towards it. Like, ugh, maybe it's fake. I bet that person is fake. And they
Yeah,
deserve to be derided for it.
yeah. Or you get somebody like, what's the guy's name? Comedian. God, I can't think of any of the movies he's done. Me, Myself, and Irene. Um, the Mask. Jim Carrey.
Oh, Jim Carrey, yeah.
Yeah. So at one point in Jim Carrey's life, he my theory is that he got some really good acid. And he had an epiphany. And it was really interesting to watch him talk after that because he had no filters as to his truth. And he spoke it to everybody. And it set off this mechanism. And he was derided and called crazy. He wasn't crazy. He was not a danger to himself or others, nor was he gravely disabled. He just saw things that other people didn't see. And he did not know that it was not cool to talk about this without any filters.
So, in terms of our own behavior, then, way of the sly man and such.
Yes. So in terms of this, that means you have to know when to speak, when to stay silent, and you have to know how to speak. And this is where skills like NLP comes in very, very handy. You can craft your words in such a way that they don't trigger people.
I don't know if anyone has seen the movie The Truman Show. That was a Jim
Oh
Carrey
yeah,
movie.
yeah,
That's an interesting movie that he's living in a completely fake world, and Truman has to try and wake up to escape from that world, which he does in the end. But it has about 2,000 people that are doing all they can to keep him asleep in that fake world, because it was a TV show.
yep.
That was opposition for you.
Yep. And yeah, that's actually a really good example of what we're talking about. That it seems like that. Hopefully this has not sounded too paranoid, because it's not meant to be paranoid at all. Realizing this is not a call to think that the world is out to get you, because it ain't. Any more than gravity is out to get you if you jump out of a tree.
Yeah, I mean, that's where unity comes into play, is that all of these phenomena are part of the whole.
There are
They're
religions.
not outside of that. They're not outside of the whole. Or
Yeah. What do you think, Nancy?
Well, one thing I was thinking was that there are religious traditions of doing good in secret.
Yes. And there are certain reasons for that, not the least of which is that it keeps you from getting into trouble.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about that angle. Now, there may be some kinds of good that you can't do in secret. One of the examples of the rebound effect, or whatever you want to call it, is there was an Israeli politician, Yitzhak Rabin, who was a peacemaker, and he was assassinated by a right-wing person who was Jewish.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. That's like Gandhi being assassinated by a Hindu because he was trying to get the Hindus and the Muslims to stop fighting. This
yeah,
plays out over and over again.
yeah. I mean, you were saying that this stuff isn't intelligent, but it's, if you don't want to call it intelligent, it's kind of clever.
Yeah, it has really good programming.
Mm-hmm.
yes, Jonathan, no good turn goes unpunished, unfortunately.
Well, that's not true, but some of them do get punished.
Well, it's a proverb, And it's a proverb because it shows up. Is it always true? No,
Nope.
but thankfully. I saw Cherie unmuted and then Lolita.
Okay,
Yeah,
Cherie, what's up?
nothing's up. But I was just going to say that with doing good, it's like we shouldn't, for ourselves as we're working, not to wait for applause, recognition, or even a pat on the back. Once you've done your good, move on. And using that force, I see that as useful for staying awake, because you can see it and you can do something about it. That mischief that wants to happen for your own self, you know, the retort, the sharp word, you know, and or the unkindness that might arise in your own self, and you think, ah, there it is. And it's kind of like monkey mind or human nature or something, but that force, it's there, very useful to stop you from going to sleep if you are prepared to head it off. So, you know, when you see it and when things happen, you can always reflect and try and change your own behavior in that. That is like, just do good. Don't wait for any recognition. Just do it and keep going.
Yeah. There's a certain way of understanding the figure of the Dajjal and this phenomenon as a tester, you know, like a test, in the sense that if you use it, if you utilize it or encounter it as you're describing, like when you see it arising, it's like, oh, I need to make sure that I stay on my game and I don't follow down this rabbit hole, because that's when terrible things happen. When you don't have that check, that pause to check and to recognize it as a test. If it
Having
runs
belong
away with you, yeah, that's when the terrible things happen.
the family culture, the belief system that can actually keep you asleep because you don't want to rock the boat. And when you start challenging that, I've learned to do it quietly, but still staying true to myself, but being able to continue to grow as a person. And you can't tell people what to do. You can't tell them what not to do, because they just go at you with another kind of way of trying to handcuff you or silence you in some way. So I find that's a very interesting thing to do for on a personal level. I can see the big scale, but for me, this talk is about how we're going to actually use that force. You can't ignore it, and you can't expect it to disappear.
It will never disappear. Yeah.
No. But this has been a great talk, and I also have to say goodbye now.
Okay. Yeah, Zainab had to take off too, but
Yeah.
Cherie, thank you so much.
Take care.
For what you've said. Thanks. Bye. Levita.
That whole, because I remember being taught, like, do your good deeds in secret when I was really young. And I never really got it until I got older and was able to do more things for people. And it seems to me what's bubbling up is the reason you don't do that, is you do things in secret, is because human beings will confuse the fact that universal intelligence, higher intelligence, whatever you want to call it, the machine, used you as a resource to help that person. And that person will confuse, instead of like, okay, well, the machine helped me by using this person, they'll confuse you with the actual resource, when, you know what, you might have had the ability to help that one time, or you might have made a sacrifice, or, you know, it might have been one of those things where, yeah, I can help you today, but 3 weeks from now, I won't have the ability, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Also, when you do something for somebody, they will feel gratitude most often, but they'll also have a sense of obligation. Like, oh, I must owe them something now. And that's something to be avoided at all cost.
Yeah. And sometimes people do stuff to engage that sense of obligation.
Yeah. They
Oh,
do.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's sneaking up on supper time here
Yes.
at Casa de Nine-Sided Circle.
We're going to have to make certain you have like a sandwich off camera ready to go. So make it
We
to,
did
so you can
that.
make it to the table.
We'd like impulsively be munching on it as we work, so that's not cool. But yeah, I mean, that's what we look forward to after we put the work in. Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
dinner.
yeah. What do you think? Are we good? Do we have any other questions that definitely need to be touched on? That's okay. Otherwise, we will go to Brady Bunch mode.
We will go to Brady Bunch mode. There we go. All right, folks, thank you for coming and putting up with us for yet another Sunday. We are always
Yes.
grateful to have you here. And we will say bye.
Yeah, and if you have any other questions, you can
Thank
reach
you.
out in the comments. You can reach out on Facebook. We are happy to hear
Yeah.
big stuff.
And if you don't mind waiting half a week or so to get a reply, you can even email us.
Yeah. At least we're honest. Yeah. All right, everyone.
Right. Talk to you
Good
soon.
night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.